My name is Jeff Goodsill. I'm a general manager for Tencent Boston, and I'm a vice president for Tencent located in China. I'm currently my talk's going to be about planning for success in the Chinese market. Well, I think there's the keys. I think first you have to understand the market and what's happening in the market. And the market is, starting with the opportunity, it's phenomenal. We have it's roughly at $3 billion today, the online market. In comparison, the North American market is somewhere between 1 to 3 billion for online activity. And it's expected to grow to almost $8.9 billion by 2013. It's phenomenal growth. The users are roughly, in 2008, China became the #1 online community in the world, 233 million users. Today, only a year later, 388 million users. That's a 65% growth. So it's really booming. There's 4 years ago, there was 350 million mobile phones. Today, there's 700 million mobile phones. There's 33 million people playing mobile games. It's phenomenal. So the growth in China it's almost like riding a rocket ship. So you have to understand that, in terms of the potential here is tremendous. And China also doesn't have a lot of experience making games. So maybe about 5 years. They've been publishing games for maybe 10, but only making games for 5. So they're very interested in Western know-how, technology, about our learning experience. So there's a lot of opportunity. So there's, I think there's sort of a baseline issue of time, language, and culture. So you have to be prepared for a lot of long trips, 24-hour trips, 12 to 13-hour time difference, and that the culture is a little different. So one piece of advice I have for people is that not getting too caught up in the cultural issues. One of my friends, a senior VP at our company, said, don't worry about those differences. If you're used to dealing in business, you're used to dealing with different people that have different backgrounds, that speak different terms. It's the same in China. China's business people they have a different perspective, but don't get too caught up or try to stereotype Chinese business people, Chinese gamers as very different. The same skills you have today, if you can be a success in North America, you can be a success in China. On the design side, it's very important that you're not just trying to do a port. You're not trying to take the product and localize it. You really want the game to be familiar to the Chinese market. So some of the best MMOs are really based on the Chinese art style, ancient Chinese culture. They look and feel Chinese. And there's basic differences in UI. For instance, things like color, things like WASD, keyboard control versus click and move. So there's different preferences about how you interface with the game. There's also different aspects from a social aspect. About 45% of the Chinese players are there to make friends, right? Which is way different than the US. An average US game is probably 80% are there for a solo experience. So you have to include social aspect into your game, social features, things like guild, things like marriage. People get together and they get married online. And it's a permanent monogamous marriage. And then there's a big ceremony and they pay microtransactions, small amount of money to have a big ceremony with music and outfits and guests and gifts. Or there's a mentor-teacher relationship, which is very important. So you have to have features that allow these more senior people to train more junior people. You want to provide the ability for people to open their own store. Some games do that. A little icon opens up over their head, and they're open for business. They're open to buy items. And so you want to include things that get people together to play. Also in PvP is another example. So it's very important that PvP you develop a strong love-hate relationship. PvP, player versus player, in combat, you want it to be intense. You want it to be really exciting, and it's okay if it's unfair. In the West, it has to be totally fair. In China, not as much. They're really interested in that just exciting experiment. And people, they're okay if people spend more money to get better outfits or to experience level quicker. So in China, the Chinese industry was born out of piracy, right, in low income. And so what happens is all the games moved online. And that's really the only market in China. There's really not a retail market for games. So, and free-to-play is the only proven model in China. Games that have tried to do a subscription-based, even small, have been penalized. Games like Aeon out of Korea tried to go recently, and they were actually dinged. So because the average wage of a game player in China is roughly $600 per month. So still relatively low. They're generally young, male and females, 19 to 25, white collar, they don't have a lot of money. So you have to be able to offer a free game. And if they really like it, then they can buy. And you need to develop systems in the game from the very beginning. Not only equipment systems, but I mentioned marriage, for instance, as something that you can do for monetization. Player stores. There's a whole bunch of different features. There's additional chat features. There's additional content. There's all a bunch of stuff, and it all needs to be designed from the very beginning.